This is the second video on this big topic of economic influences for Edexcel. I'm going to try and keep the video less than 10 minutes, which will be a bit of a challenge because I like to talk, but let's try and make sure that we cover the key things, which is that you need to know about the rate of inflation and the consumer prices index in this video on inflation. So inflation occurs where there's a sustained rise in average prices, and this is measured by the consumer price index, which is shortened to CPI. So over time, the general pattern is that prices go up. Now that sounds like a bad thing, but the Bank of England, who the government put in charge of managing inflation, managing the price level in the UK, want there to be an inflation rate of 2%. So the Bank of England has a target that they try to achieve of keeping inflation at 2%. It's technically 2% plus or minus 1%. So anywhere between 1 and 3%, the government is very, very happy with that rate of inflation, that rate of average price increases. So that means that a product that costs £100 this year will cost £102 in a year, okay? So why is that good? Well, basically 2% is enough to allow businesses to put up their prices a little bit, okay? Consumers are expecting prices to go up by 2%. So businesses know they can put their prices up by 2%. That's good because they can make a little bit more profit, all right? That allows them to pay their shareholders more. So it's a reward for investing in business. If they put their prices up, they can pay their employees a little bit more, and it gives them a little bit more money to invest in the business, right? But the key thing is that it's kept lower than 3%. We don't want inflation rising quickly because that causes all sorts of problems for the economy and businesses, which we shall get into in a second. So CPI, the Consumer Price Index, essentially what the government does to check that it is on course for its 2% target is every month it takes what it calls a basket of goods and services. It's an average basket of goods and services and comprises of all of the items that the average household would spend over the course of a month. So not just food, but food is a big part of it, but also clothing, household services like electricity and gas, health, recreation and culture, everything that the average household spends its money on. And the government every month collects the price of those goods and services and add it up, and they come up with a total for that basket of goods and services. They then compare that to how much those same goods and services, that same basket of goods and services cost last year. And if it comes out at 2% more expensive this year, the government is very, very happy. It says here it's a weighted average basket of goods and services. The weighting simply means that food, which we buy every month, has a higher weighting than digital cameras, right? If the price of digital cameras goes up by 10%, it has a very small impact on me because I buy a digital camera, once every 10 years, all right? But food I buy every month. So if the price of food goes up by 10%, that has a big impact, and that's what this weighted bit means. So the most important expenditure has a heavier weighting and contributes more to the final number. So essentially, what Edexcel say you need to know is that the government wants a 2% rate of inflation, and we'll have a look at how that will affect businesses in a second, but it also wants you to know about the Consumer Prices Index, which is the way we measure inflation, and we do that by comparing a similar basket of goods and services to the same as it was last year. This is the Consumer Prices Index. The video will quickly be outdated and this inflation rate will change, but you can see since 2014 the economy, the Bank of England hasn't done too badly at keeping inflation within its 1 to 3% target range, and that's not always been the case historically. So we've done pretty well with inflation over the last few years. Okay, so what actually causes inflation to happen? So these are diagrams that you should recognise from theme 1. You can see that when there is high demand for a product, it increases the price of it. Equally, when there is a lack of supply of a product and supply shifts to the left, it also pushes up prices. Now, these are for individual products that you would draw these demand and supply diagrams, but we can do the same for the whole economy. And we can say when there is a high level of demand for goods and services, it pushes up the price of them because they're more, these goods and services become more scarce, more people want them. Equally, if there is a fall in supply, that also creates scarcity and drives prices up. So that's called demand pull inflation, where there's a high level of demand in the economy. If it's going really well, everyone's got a job. That puts upward pressure on prices because people are demanding lots of goods and services. What might cause the supply to fall in the whole economy? Well, it would be increases in the costs of production. So if workers across the economy are demanding higher wages, that means that some businesses might not be able to pay them. They might go out of business. If raw materials become more expensive, a business might have to, or businesses across the economy would cut the supply of that product. And it drives up prices. Same with rent. If that goes up, it's going to force some businesses out of business, right? And it forces that supply curve to the left, increasing scarcity. Okay, I'm going to leave inflationary expectations for now. Right, so we say that we want a 2% rate of inflation. Now, why is that good for businesses? Number one, a low rate of inflation encourages consumers to spend their money before prices increase. So as long as inflation is low, that 2%, right? That's great because consumers know that prices are going to go up 2%. If I'm thinking about buying a car and I know the price is going to increase next year, it might encourage me to buy that car today. So it incentivizes my demand today. Right, businesses can also actually get away with increasing their profits, right? If there is a low rate of inflation. Well, how do they do that? Let's say they put their prices up by 2%. They might give their workers a 1% pay rise. Their workers are going to be happy because they've got a 1% pay rise, but the business actually increased prices by 2%. So the business earns more profit. So that's great. Price stability also increases the ability of individuals and businesses to plan. Right. Price stability makes businesses and consumers more confident. If businesses and consumers know that prices are going to go up by 2%, it enables them to plan their finances much better. Consumers are willing to spend their money if they've been able to plan their finances and they know they're going to be able to cover it. And businesses are able to calculate how much revenue they'll earn from an investment, how much it will cost them in the future, and therefore they're more likely to invest in improving their businesses. So price stability encourages both consumer demand and it encourages businesses to invest and improve their business, basically. Okay, I wouldn't worry too much about this point, but basically, inflation means that the value of debt is eroded over time. So if I borrow £100,000 this year and pay it back in 5 years' time, that £100,000 is going to buy me more stuff today than it buys me in 5 years' time. So this is a good thing about inflation, right? If inflation is going up, okay, I'm going to have to pay my debts back, but actually, when I pay them back, they're worth less in real terms than they were when I borrowed the money. So if I borrow £100,000 today and I invest in a snazzy new factory and I pay that back in 5 years' time, actually the £100,000 that I pay back, that factory would actually cost like £115,000 in 5 years' time, and I'm only paying £100,000 back. So great news for business. If you're not sure on that final point, don't worry about it. Right, cons of high inflation to businesses. So when inflation starts to creep up to about 5%, it can start to get not very good because consumer confidence goes down, people stop spending their money, right? Consumers do not like rising prices when they're rising too quickly. They're going to save their money and that puts them off buying stuff from businesses. So that's not good. Right, the cost of wages and things are going to go up for business. So input prices rise. That is not good for businesses, okay? So they're going to have to spend more on their workers. That's going to send business confidence down, all right? And it can lead ultimately to a recession. High inflation is going to discourage investment. So, you know, why would I buy a new factory if prices are increasing by 10, 15%, and I don't know what prices I'm going to have to charge consumers in the future, or if they're even going to buy my product, all right? It creates a huge amount of uncertainty, which is really bad for businesses. If I am selling a lot to people overseas and there is high inflation, so the cost that I'm having to pay workers and for raw materials is going up, I'm going to have to increase my prices. But, you know, people abroad aren't going to like that, so my exports might fall. Okay, menu costs. It's a funny term, but basically imagine in Tesco if the prices were changing every week and they had to change their price labels every week. Right, there's a huge cost for printing new price labels, paying someone to put them out on the shelves. Shoe leather costs are the costs that you have to pay to compare, right? If there's a high inflationary environment, you are going to want to get the best, lowest prices for your supplies. But that's going to involve comparing prices from a variety of people, all right, because prices are changing all the time. So you're going to need to pay someone in your organisation to do that, and that's called shoe leather costs. If prices are rising in a nice, stable way, you might not need to shop around so much, okay, but you're going to be really trying to get the best deal if there's high inflation, and that adds to your costs as a business. And finally, you know, if prices are increasing, your workers are going to be demanding a wage rise. That puts up your costs, and it can be called a wage price spiral. High inflation, anything over 3%, not good for businesses. But if we keep inflation low and stable, that's good news.